Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this anti-Muslim citizenship bill in India. Now, interestingly, this bill has provoked a lot of people. It has annoyed all the minorities, primarily the Sikhs and the Muslims there. And whether you talk about Calcutta, you talk about Lucknow, you talk about Assam or particularly the Bihar area, the east I'm talking about of India, and even some places in Punjab as well as in Haryana and down south also. And never forget about Kashmir, what is exactly going on out there. But now, since this is something which is the basic problem, I mean, one of the major fault lines of India where they're just trying to protect the Hindu majority, whereas when you talk about the minority, that is around 12 crore Sikhs, more than 20 crore Muslims there, and when you talk about the rest of the minorities, that is also a huge number. But primarily, it seems that the Muslims are being targeted there, whether you talk about Kashmir or other related areas. As far as this bill is concerned, people from Punjab, even the leadership from Punjab and some other states, they've also refused to accept it. Where you talk about this particular bill, I remember 311 votes were in favor and around 80 were against in the lower house, that is the Lok Sabha. When you talk about the Rajya Sabha, 105 versus 120 something. Now, still it got approved, simple majority, that was the point. But now there is going to be a lot of problems for the Muslims as far as the citizenship is concerned. A couple of very interesting facts which we'll show you in our report also will highlight the issue. But having said that, now the real problem has started for India. This extremist mindset, this Hindutva concept, this RSS philosophy, that is going to ruin India. Modi wants to make India a particular state only for the Hindus, whereas India claims itself to be a secular state where the rights of all the minorities will be protected. Now, that is not the case as we speak. We'll show you a report. After that, we'll introduce you to our panelists and we'll start our discussion.
Clashes have erupted in several Indian cities as demonstrations against a controversial citizenship law entered a fifth day today. India has passed a law that grants citizenship to religious minorities except Muslims from neighboring countries. The new citizenship law allows Indian citizenship to Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis and Christians from Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan, but makes no reference to Muslims. More than 100 students have been injured in India after baton-wielding police charged at them and fired tear gas at two federally run universities where students were holding anti-citizenship law protests. Large protests are going on in New Delhi, Mumbai and Madras. This controversial bill is part of a Hindu supremacist agenda that is pushed by the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This law is part of the government's agenda to marginalize Muslims. Critics in India say that it violates secular principles enshrined in the Indian Constitution. Earlier this week, the United Nations Human Rights Office voiced concern that the new law was fundamentally discriminatory in nature.
Well, sixth day of continuous riots in most parts of India, resulting in 6 people were dead and scores are injured there. Curfew-like situation is almost in most of those states. The military has taken over, they're looking after the affairs now, people can't come out on the roads, and exactly the same situation which we have earlier seen in Kashmir. It's almost 4 months now that Kashmir is under curfew, acute shortage of food, clean drinking water, medical facilities, medicines, you name it, and the problem is there. So the case is with most of these countries. Let's see when these people would be back in their houses, but it seems they won't. This is something which has been snatched away the right to live in India. Interestingly, there was this army officer who had served for 30 years but was a Muslim, couldn't prove his identity as far as the Indian requirement of documentation is concerned. And interestingly, this man is sent to jail. Just imagine, the picture you're seeing, this man was an officer who has served, and interestingly, this man was also a war veteran in Kargil. Just imagine. This is what is happening in India. This is what secular India is. This is what shining India is. This is what India is. To talk about this, we have with us in our studio on my right is Dr. Professor Rifat Hussain Saab. He's a senior strategic analyst and also a writer, a columnist. Sir, thank you very much, Dr. Saab.
Thank you so much.
And we have with us Mr. Imran Jan, who's a senior columnist, journalist. Thank you very much, Imran. And we have with us Dr. Asma Shakir Khwaja Saiba. She's a foreign affairs expert and is also an author. Thank you very much, ma'am. Now, Dr. Saab, people say that when we talk, we means Pakistan talks about the Kashmiri people because Pakistan and India has this old dispute regarding the land of Kashmir. And we want that indigenous movement, which is just asking for the right of self-determination, should be granted that so that the decision of Kashmir should finally take place. But sir, forget about Kashmir. Now you're talking about the eruption of this problem all over India, and especially the Muslim majority east of India, whether you talk about Assam, you talk about Bihar, you talk about Nagaland, you talk about Manipur, you talk about, for that matter, even Calcutta and Lucknow. Sir.
Well, I think, Faisal, what's happening in India reminds me of Europe in the late 30s, when we had the collapse of the liberal order, and as a result of that collapse, you had the rise of fascism, you had the rise of Nazism in Germany, and then of course Italy, and then you had the Second World War.
Correct, sir.
But what's happening in India is a reminder to the world that India no longer believes in at least under BJP, it no longer believes in India being secular, and the facade of secularism which was put on by first Congress and subsequently BJP, that has been torn asunder, and now people are beginning to see the real face of India, which is Modi's India, and Modi has campaigned his second term victory on the idea of Hindutva, and we know how dangerous that ideology is. But with the with the outbreak of these protests, worldwide protests, I would say nationwide protests, you have New Delhi in which Jamia Islamia.
Yes, we all witnessed what happened to the students.
3,000 students came out, and not only they came out, but there were tremendous encroachment on their rights, and they were hiding in a mosque, and the police went in and they pulled these guys out, and they were subjected to a lot of torture and a lot of abuse. So, and then of course we have the dharna in Assam for the last 4 or 5 days, and there have been number of casualties. Reported casualties are 6, but the people who have been subjected to state sanctioned violence, especially by the police, and one should also say this, the police is no longer a neutral factor. They are not trying to protect people's peaceful right to protest, but they are using violence against them. So that's one dimension of what's happening inside India. But the more interesting is the worldwide reaction against these amendments in the Indian Citizenship Act, as a result of which the minorities, and which essentially means that they are talking about people living in Afghanistan, people living in Bangladesh, and people who are living in Pakistan. Those are if the minorities want to migrate to India, so they are welcome. But the Muslims, if they want to, and the Muslims living in India, and they want to, and the Muslims from these countries, if they want to come to India, so they are not welcome. So because of the discriminatory nature of this law, there has been a worldwide condemnation. We saw in the reports that you just showed that the UN Human Rights has condemned this. The European courts, international lawyers Mr. L'Oreal has also condemned this law because, and they have asked the Indian government to take back this law. And from within India, not only there has been violent protest against it from all over the country, but there are number of petitions that have been put up to the Supreme Court, and there is an expectation that Supreme Court might stand down this law, even though it has been passed.
Dr. Saab, that's the same Supreme Court from which most of the Muslims, the effectees of Babri Mosque, if you remember, sir, were expecting too much. Nothing happened because the decision was again taken under the pressure of the current government. And most likely whatever they have decided even now will not be reversed unless until something major happens or there is some sort of an external pressure on them. Because when you look at the designing of the future of India by Modi, it's pretty interesting in a way that it is only for the Hindus. I mean, rest of these minorities, I mean, they do not matter to the current government. But moving on to you, Jan Saab, now there are a couple of related questions. First of all, sir, when you look at the damage calculation, obviously Narendra Modi, whatever he has done in Gujarat, we witnessed that. Whatever he has done in Kashmir or other areas, we have all seen that as well. But sir, when you look at it from this perspective, that this man is having his second term, this is the beginning, and now he has the absolute majority. Any bill that is passed is always approved because the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, they have a lot of majority over there as well. But now, sir, the kind of damage, people being killed, this is being reported, no matter how much curfew or the level of curfew they're going to impose there. But at the end of the day, you're talking about dozens and dozens of people being injured. 6 of them got injured. This is the report we have got. People are practically on the roads and chanting slogans against the current government. Nothing is happening. What sort of a design is brewing in Modi's mind, sir? And especially, forget about Kashmir, we understand that problem. But over there now, sir?
Well, this this design had been there in place for a while now. And before I get to that, first of all, I just want to congratulate India for legalizing religious discrimination. No country has come close to that. So that is quite a remarkable achievement for India. Secondly, I also want to thank the Modi regime for validating the two-nation theory, actually. Because many, the people who like to call themselves the left-wing intellectuals in this country, they always like to provide these counterfactuals. The whataboutery, what if Pakistan was never created and we would have been living peacefully in a united India, just like many other Muslims are living there? They can just look at it now. And also there's another fact in the history that not many people know about, or they just get it confused, they just get it backwards. Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the ambassador of unity between Muslims and Hindu. He actually got that title in 1916, if I'm not wrong. And then came Gandhi, who injected religion in the freedom struggle, and the zeal that followed, Jinnah couldn't control that. And that eventually, he was convinced, he came up to this unmistakable conclusion that, these two people, Muslims and Hindus, will have to live in separate countries. Now, what is happening now, this new law, CAB, Citizenship Amendment Bill in India, what both sides are actually talking about is missing the real issue. Indian government is saying that we want to help religious minorities in Muslim majority countries in our neighborhood. People from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan who are not Muslim can come to this country and we'll give them shelter. The opposing side says, well, especially the people in Assam, they say, well, we don't want to mix with people who do not really belong to our culture. We don't want to mingle with them because we have a distinct way of life. What misses that, these are basically broadly these two different arguments. In my humble view, the real sinister cause behind CAB is not outward but inward, toward India. What actually CAB is doing is, CAB is sort of like an insurance policy to protect the Hindus and non-Muslim who actually were rendered stateless with the National Register of Citizens, NRC, that this year went into effect, and it basically rendered close to 2 million people stateless. But once those 2 million people were stateless, that meant that people belonging to Islam, Hinduism, and many other religions were going to be expelled out of the country.
But Imran, there's a point. Now,
How-
for example, the picture of that officer which we have shown you, interestingly, he's a war veteran. He has served in Kargil. And this man has been serving in the Indian Army for the last 30 years,
He was
3
in
decades
Kargil,
I'm talking
yeah.
about. Now, that man has been picked up by the military, handed over to the police, and he's in the lockup. Now, my point is that a person of that level who has served to protect the country,
yes.
and he's been in military, I mean, what sort of a rule is this?
So exactly, CAB is going to protect people not like those. Had CAB not been in place, by CAB I mean Citizenship Amendment Bill, not just people like him, but people of generals who belong to even Hindu faith would also be in prison. But CAB protects them because CAB says it's like a filter, you know. All right, so 2 million people are stateless now. They all have to go or go to jail. They
Minus
have to-
the Muslims, rest of them, okay, now you fall
Exactly.
into that category where we can
That's a
give
filter,
you some
know.
sort
So,
of a
okay,
citizenship.
so they have to go, but you know, CAB is going to protect all non-Muslims.
What about the future of the Muslims now? Where will be they're flushed out, let me put it this way.
Or in prison.
Bangladesh for that matter, will they accept it? People who've been living, I mean, for 30, 40 years or maybe more in some of the Indian states, and suddenly one fine morning they're told to leave because you're a Muslim and this is the new law. I mean, just look at the level of insecurity.
There
Do
will
you
be
think these people who were practically dying, fleeing from Rohingya, and you know those Muslims, the way their villages were torched, the way their women were raped, the way their kids and the elderly were killed? I mean, that's not a joke. They had closed their borders.
Yes.
Yeah.
See?
That's exactly what happens. The Muslims in India, the future doesn't look very bright, and I shouldn't use the word expecting, but what I see in the future for them is a massive genocide, because neighboring countries cannot provide massive help. You know, it's not like there's like a superpower country in the neighborhood, and even superpower countries don't do that. You know, when Syrians fled, the United States and many other leading countries literally shut their borders. You know, only Germany, you know, allowed some people. So there could be a genocide, there could be killings of Muslims on a very massive scale inside India, and since now India is a US ally, there will be complete silence over whatever happens inside. Because there has been, I mean, this is a case study for someone who wants to study. Every time a country becomes a US ally, their atrocities against their own people increase, because the country that is supposed to question you, that usually
You can handle the
questions you,
media, you can handle all
They don't do
these
that
external
anymore.
forces which can actually sort of do some damage to you.
So, not a very good, bright future for
Ma'am,
Indian
now,
Muslims.
Dr. Aslam, there are few very important points and I want you to throw light on it. Number one is, this Modi is India, so-called the extremist India, and now there's a reaction all over India. People are on the streets, people are actually very concerned about the future, especially if you're a Muslim. You're a Muslim, no matter whether you were born in India, you were raised in India, they can practically throw you out. And this is not the first time that this is happening. I still remember the other day somebody was giving me a very good example that Shabana Azmi and her husband, they both wanted to buy some property in Mumbai. Yeah. They were not allowed to, just because they are Indian celebrities, stars, Javed Akhtar Saab for that matter, known names all over the world. I mean, they were not allowed to buy property in Bombay. Just imagine. So this is the kind of mindset that is prevailing there. Ma'am, first of all, since I asked Imran Saab that what exactly Modi is thinking, I don't think he's thinking anything. It's just happening. Because if he was thinking, he would have never, ever taken such measures. Ma'am, your take, I mean, is this the beginning of the end of secular India?
Actually, if we see Modi's policies, it is one thing is clear, that he is he wants to establish white supremacy. So this Hindutva ideology is about supremacy of certain race and caste or color over the others. And being Muslims, and as you said, that is it the end of secular India, but my question is that was India ever secular? Because what
they
policies
always claim, they always...
Yeah, this is what they claimed.
But they had a facade about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a pretension.
Yeah, so Modi maybe for the first time explicitly demonstrating what exactly the Indian mindset is, and he is not that wise to implicitly follow those or work for those objectives. And But what Modi's thinking is the goal of next elections. Like Modi has realized, or he has definitely a clear idea that his vote bank is the Hindu radical vote bank, and in order to keep that vote bank intact, especially after the recent shocking results of in elections in some states, it is very important to keep that Hindu radical vote bank intact, and that is why he is doing those actions which have definitely short terms benefits for the Modi regime, but long term, definitely long term losses for Indian constitution and Indian federation as well. So, and another thing which I think this act, this bill, this is like this can be an instability factor for the neighboring states, because what Modi government has done, they have incentivized the minorities in the neighboring states to do whatever they want in against if their governments, and they can get an Indian citizenship afterwards if they want. So it is like not only a discriminatory
Absolutely.
thing, but it is it can be used as instability factor in the neighboring state, because there is no point to when the world is when the walls or lines are getting blurred in the world, it is not the time to discriminate someone on the
I mean,
basis
the
of
whole
religion.
entire globe is moving in another direction, and the
Yeah.
Indian philosophy is in the opposite. Ma'am, if you allow me, we've been joined in by Mr. Michael Kugelman. He's the Deputy Director of Asia Programs.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Kugelman.
Good evening to you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for taking out the time and talking to us. First of all, sir, since we are not talking about Kashmir in particular, but generally, sir, now it's all over India. You look at Assam, you look at Bihar, you look at other states on the eastern side. You talk about Guwahati, you talk about Calcutta, you talk about Lucknow. Now, 4 people were shot by police, one was burnt alive, another one was also killed. Now, what exactly is going on, sir? What do you think? What's brewing in the mind of Narendra Modi and his associates?
Well, you know, you're right. I mean, the images that we've seen over the weekend in India are quite striking. It's almost like, you know, it's Kashmir playing out in Delhi and Mumbai and so many other cities across India. In terms of why we're seeing this, I think it's very simple. I think that Prime Minister Modi is aggressively carrying out his social agenda, his Hindu nationalist agenda, and that strategy. And that entails the types of initiatives such as this new citizenship law, which are clearly meant to be discriminatory toward the Indian Muslim community or Muslims that are in India. And so naturally, that would attract a level of response, an angry response. And I think what's also quite striking is that you've got a lot of people across India that are very angry about this law, who are not themselves Muslims. They are Hindus who are just unhappy about the idea of any type of prospects for more immigration into India from those 3 neighboring countries, because of the idea that this new citizenship law will make it easy for them to get citizenship. So it's a big mess, quite frankly. I think it's a big political mess now for the Modi administration. It's already, I think, starting to get a bit vulnerable because of the economic challenges in the country that have not been sufficiently addressed. But I think that we're probably going to see the Modi administration continue to push forward with this strategy. I mean, it's been promising to do so for a number of years, and I think it could get worse before it gets better. And just to end here, I'll just say that the response that Prime Minister Modi gave yesterday to the violent protests across India, I found very disturbing. He said that we know that those staging these violent protests, we know who they are based on their clothing. And that is just a very opposite of a call for calm and unity. That was a wholly communal message. It was a completely communal message that I think could end up firing things up even more. So very troubling state of affairs as we've seen things play out the last few days.
Well, India always claimed that India is a very secular state. Now, do you think that particular perception is going to get eroded maybe in another few years? Because this is what people all over the world are witnessing. See what is happening in Kashmir, in Delhi. The Chief Minister of Punjab refused to accept this bill. So many other Chief Ministers also did the same. Problem on the eastern side. And every time something happens in India, Michael, they always end up blaming Pakistan, primarily because of Kashmir. Now, if something happens in India, because of these riots, because of those people who feel rejected, do you think India will have this so-called, according to them, the legitimate right to blame Pakistan every time? Do you think that right is going to remain there, sir?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, this is what India, as you suggested, has done for so long, is to outsource blame to Pakistan for just about any type of problem in India, whether you're talking about protest or unrest or something like that. But I think the very principle of Hindu nationalism goes against the idea of secularism and goes against the idea of religious pluralism. Bedrock principles in India that it's like to hold up is very definitive of its political system. Hindu nationalism is all about elevating one religion, the majority religion, above all others in both state and society. And so long as the Modi administration continues to carry out that policy of Hindu nationalism, and as I said, I think it is in an aggressive fashion, then you really do have to worry that we could soon see the day when India has ceased to be a secular state and has simply become a Hindu nation, as India would want to define it. So, I think that the whole Pakistan component to this, and I think that's part of the hard line that the Modi administration has taken toward Pakistan, is to blame Pakistan for all the bad things that happen, and also quite dangerously to accuse any dissenters in India, any opponents of the government or of government policies, of being close to Pakistan and essentially calling on them to quote go to Pakistan or something like that. That does not help, clearly. That just adds to the divisive, volatile environment. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see an end to that type of rhetoric so long as the current government remains in power in India.
Now, last quick comment on this point, Michael, that now when we talk about India, we talk about especially when you're talking about the eastern side of India, you're talking about the culture, language, their social identity, their political views, religious concepts maybe, and so many other attributes basically. Don't you think that this is primarily an absolute encroachment of their freedom?
I'm sorry, encroachment on their freedom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, for sure. I mean, you look at northeastern India, you look at Assam, which is where a lot of the unhappiness has been centered. It's a very complex state. I mean, it's a state that has a history of immigration, of illegal immigration, and it has a history of xenophobia, a history of people that don't want any type of immigration. You do have a number of Muslim migrants that have come in from Bangladesh over the years. It's a place where you've had migrants come from Bangladesh who are not Muslims. So it's a pretty volatile stew, so to speak. So it's understandable that some of the biggest levels of protest and concern have been in that state. But as you said at the beginning, this opposition to the citizenship law is not restricted to one particular part of India, including Assam. I think it's very striking that it's been in Delhi, it's been in other major cities. And that clearly is going to be something that this government is going to have to figure out how to deal with, because I think it's going to continue. And let's say that there's a challenge brought to the Indian Supreme Court about this law, and I imagine there will be a challenge. If the Supreme Court upholds the law, meaning that the law is formally a law of the land, I think that could be a trigger for fresh and additional protests. So it's going to be a very tough. And of course, that has implications for the Indian state as we know it, one that has projected itself as a secular state. So some very troubling times ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael, for your comments. Now, Dr. Saab, very troubling times ahead. This is what he said. A country where cow is sacred and a man has no value, especially if a man is a Muslim, sir.
Well, I think there are two very, very disturbing implications of this CAB law that have been passed. One is, and Asma alluded to that, it incentivizes the dissenting minority voices from our neighboring countries to migrate into India, and India can use them as a potential fifth column to cause trouble in the neighborhood. So that's one. The other is that it pits for example, the Assamese people who are protesting not because they sympathize with the Muslims, because Muslims are being discriminated against, but they want to say that, look, we do not want this kind of immigration mass scale en masse to come into India, because these guys are going to take our jobs, and there are already communal tensions between the people from Bangladesh and some of the Rohingyas who have come from Myanmar, and under this cab law they have no right to be accepted by the Indian state. So this is this would actually this will ignite the ethnic and the cultural tensions between the settled people and the new wave of immigrants whom this law encourages. So on both counts, it does not bode well for peace in South Asia, because people were looking towards India, that India is the cradle of civilization, it's the cradle of plurality, and but Modi has done so much damage to the Indian fabric, and secularism has been hit for a 6, and under this new law, I think India's claim to be a secular country is grievously gets undermined. So these are some of the disturbing factors, and that's why in Pakistan's National Assembly today, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, openly spoke about the dangerous implications of this law. Even though Indians are well within their rights to develop those laws, but then those laws, when they involve the minorities living peacefully in other countries, and it gives them an incentive to come to India. So there's a lot of people will be wondering that what the motive of the Modi government is to invite these minorities into India. And then, as I said, that there is always a possibility that that these people
primarily demographic changes could be one reason.
Yeah,
sir.
of course.
But
of
other
course.
than that, obviously, they will use all those people against those concerned countries, especially against Pakistan for that matter, so that they can use. But Dr. Saab, there is another important point here also. Modi, Amit Shah, and all these concerned, so-called the decision makers in India at the moment, they've asked the public to be calm. Now, there were riots in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Kolkata, in Hyderabad, you name it. I'm talking about the 4 biggest cities in India. People were out all over. Now, how can you expect, it's a religious affair, it's something which is absolute discrimination. Future for the Muslims in particular, God knows what exactly they are thinking at the moment, but it's not safe at all. Yeah. Forget about the security for the living or the thing, it's about life. Now, sir, the point is, as I earlier mentioned, sir, a country where a cow is sacred and a man could be lynched just because he was selling the beef of the cow, though India is one of the largest exporters of beef in the world, so especially to US. Is anyone ever going to raise voice against these concerns, or no, sir? This is not going to happen just because it's not only India. Most likely they have some sort of a foreign support, somebody's backing them up, and this is what is happening now.
But I think that the Indian public sees through Modi's game, and they are realizing that
they voted for him, sir. Look at the number of votes against.
They have voted
and for him.
But
I mean,
they
look at the
voted
difference.
only for once. And Modi government has become so arrogant after his second electoral victory that they thought that they could get away with literally with murder, and they instituted this law. And and look at his response. He is not willing to even entertain the possibility of India having made a cardinal mistake which needs to be rectified. And we are already seeing, as Dr. Asma mentioned, that the Indians have that the BJP has lost elections in a couple of real states, and I think if this trend persists, coupled with the economic difficulties, because their economic growth rate has come down to 4.6, and the Indian people will be so alienated by the time Modi is done with his second term that there will be there's going to be they will not make the mistake of putting BJP into power for the third time, because but then the question is that in these remaining 3 or 4 years he would have done so much damage.
That's what I'm saying, sir. He has the majority in the upper house, he has the majority in the lower house.
To the fabric of the Indian society. Yes. And we know from international relations perspective that when governments get into trouble with their own people, so they seek external diversions, and they look toward the neighbor.
So if something at a much larger scale all over India, in all the major towns starts happening, there are riots all over, maybe their escape could be an attack on Azad Kashmir or something, and they'll start. So this is, do you think this could be all orchestrated, sir?
Well, of course it is orchestrated. Of course it is orchestrated. Now the Americans are making, some noise about, that, and the human rights organizations, they are protesting against India, but India had not anticipated that there is going to be such a massive domestic eruption against this law, and there is going to be a very strong international reaction. So I think.
Let's hope there is. So far we haven't seen, sir. Imran sahab, 2-3 things here. One is about the question that the Supreme Court of India is going to take some wise decision. They have not taken a wise decision so far, because it seems that most of their judges are either under some sort of a threat, let me use this word, or maybe if not under some sort of threat, under some sort of a political influence, and there are multiple options for that political influence. Bribing could be one, or anything else. Though we all thought that whenever we used to give examples, Roxa, we always used to say the Election Commission of India is so strong, that nothing is happening, sir. They are puppets.
So it is actually wishful thinking to believe that the Indian Supreme Court will do the magic. I just want to quote one example. In Colombia, a far away distant country, but there's a parallel. When Pablo Escobar was alive and his drug cartel was very strong, judges used to give out drastic verdicts by covering their faces to avoid consequences from the drug cartels later on.
You could only hear them, you wouldn't see them.
Exactly. So these Indian Supreme Court justices, they know very well the protests right now are really bad and they're extreme. But these are mostly the people who are Muslim, or they are pro-Muslim, pro-rights.
Even Sikhs are on the road, sir.
There are
so many footages wish we
there
could
are
show
Hindus,
you on
as
TV.
Michael Kugelman mentioned. But imagine when the Supreme Court says, okay, well, we cannot have this law, it runs against our constitution. Imagine the Hindutva extremist protests then in India. That would be on a much larger scale than what we are seeing now. If we are aware of it, the Supreme Court justices in India.
Do you think that is the kind of counter strategy Narendra Modi is going to use by sending those?
They would be counting on it. They would be counting.
This is what they have done in Kashmir, sir. I've heard that along with the police, these extremist Hindus holding weapons and all sorts of, starting from the swords to knives and you name it, and they are attacking various areas where they're killing, and nothing is being told to anyone. I mean, silent operation. So the case is with this particular side also, sir?
Exactly. That could be one of his strategies, and it looks very, very possible that is the case. As you mentioned, there are Sikhs and there are Hindus, as Mr. Kugelman mentioned, who are also protesting in the streets. Those Hindus, some of the light-minded or some of the rather educated, in that society, they know that today it is Muslims, tomorrow it is us, because it's not going to stop there. And actually the Amit Shah, the Home Minister, if I'm saying his title correctly, he actually mentioned that this is sort of like an experiment that we're going to replicate in the rest of the country. This is not going to stop here. We are only seeing the results of what we're doing now, and we will replicate that in the rest of the country. And that scared a lot of people. And these people who are Hindus and Sikhs and other religious people who belong to other faiths, that is exactly why they're protesting, because they know tomorrow this regime is going to come after their rights, and then they'll be in trouble. So, but again, I also want to caution that that's a very tiny fraction of that society. Modi may be doing crazy things, but he knows full well that the majority of the Indian population is with him. That is why he was re-elected with an unprecedented level of support. So, I mean, the odds are against sanity. The odds are against peace. I also want to say that, and it's going to sound a little weird, but for me as a Pakistani, this is good news actually. Nuclear armed states cannot be defeated militarily. The only way they're going to go down is just by such implosions and self-destruction moves that will actually result in self-destruction. That is one such move. I would rather watch them destroy themselves, because one aspect of it is there are 16 million Hindus in Bangladesh alone. What are they going to do? Allow all of them in India? What is that going to do to the economy of India? The jobs and everything else. So I mean, they are on a fast track mode. They are on a freeway headed
So
toward
whatever
destruction.
Narendra Modi or his Home Minister or Mr. Dawal, the National Security Advisor, they've all decided to do, this is going to take India on a self-destruction mode, right,
Absolutely, absolutely. In my view, that's exactly.
Now
what.
moving on to you, ma'am. First of all, future of India, future of Muslims, in particular future of minorities, along with this very important point that when you say that wherever there is turmoil, it really engulfs the entire region, ma'am. We have a problem in Afghanistan, Iran is under a lot of sanctions, and then the other border is with India. And the neighboring areas in particular, I mean, you talk about Punjab or related areas, all the way down to Rajasthan, there are a lot of problems, and these are the states, for example, Rajasthan for that matter, sir, he lost there, and that was his main area, just like PMLN is known for an absolute command in Lahore.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
See, situation is definitely dangerous for Indians, not for us. But if we see Modi's policy, what he is doing, it is weakening India from within. And this is not weakening of a normal, of an ordinary state. It's a nuclear state with extensive, massive nuclear stockpiles and nuclear things. So, and then that is also supported by aggressive military designs by the government. So, I can see that the more India would be destabilized internally, the more polarization would be there, and the things would get out of hand of Modi's government and governance. Then there would be Modi would try to open some external borders, or would try to take some aggressive measures vis-a-vis its neighbors, just to divert public's attention from the real issue. The more the economy, as we know, the Indian economy is in trouble. So the more there would be economic losses, the internal polarization, people would be angry, more people on the street. So Modi would play that card. As someone said that, yeah, when Modi said that nuclear weapons are not for Diwali, and someone said that, yeah, they are for elections. So similarly, I can see that Modi would, and Modi is very good in false flag operations, in unnecessarily opening aggressive postures vis-a-vis its neighbors, opening international borders just to divert public's attention and build this phenomena of fascist Hindu nationalism on false notions of animosity and hatred vis-a-vis people of from certain religion. And as Michael Kugelman said, that India is a land of immigration, this law restricts immigration. No, this law restricts only immigration from a certain religious group.
Yes,
it is
absolute
not for
discrimination, ma'am.
If
Yes.
India if Modi would be concerned with immigration, this law would not be discriminatory. It is only against Muslims, and what message it communicates within India, what Muslims would be thinking, and that how inferior and unwanted they are in the larger Indian setup or governance. So this feeling, we call it feeling of deprivation, being deprived, being disengaged, being not a stakeholder in a certain system of governance. And this is what Modi is inculcating in the Indian Muslims and Muslims around India, that Muslims are unwanted, Muslims are not liked by Indians or Hindus or Modi regimes, and therefore Modi is openly against any Muslim benefits. If we see Kashmir, if we see Babri Masjid, and another thing which is quite disturbing, that we all know that how the international community reacted when there were state violence against protesters in Hong Kong. And now,
look at the media coverage. Nobody talks about Kashmir. Nobody talks about the one man got killed there, and there was a huge cry all over the globe, right?
State violence against the students of Jamia Millia. There is state violence in Calcutta. There is state sponsored.
Ma'am, Jamia Millia Islamia, as well as Aligarh University in UP, they practically came under attack. More than 100 students were picked up.
Exactly.
So many were beaten.
Brutally beaten.
They said it was like a Taliban law situation, as if there's Taliban in charge.
Exactly. And see, I mean, this is going to boil the current
Exactly.
temperature in the
And
corridors
look,
of
look at the
the
international
Rajya Sabha
media.
and Lok Sabha.
Look at this brutality against the Indian students of different universities, and if they are in universities, it means they are not an ordinary Indian citizen, they are highly educated Indian citizen, and all this brutality, state sponsored brutality by state forces against those innocent students is not been noticed by the international community. And when they, especially when India claims itself to be secular, to be a democratic state, to be an inclusive state, which it is not, but look at the international community, that they are not even concerned what is happening against students all over the India,
Not
and
even a
what they
single
are
report.
asking for.
That's what I'm saying.
And
Media is
see,
media, in fact, is a part and parcel of the whole deal.
yeah.
That's how you.
Yeah, and what those
control it,
students
yeah.
are asking for, they are asking for non-discriminatory Indian constitution. And that
Tomorrow,
any
maybe,
government-
ma'am, when you talk about the selection of Indian Army, Air Force, or Navy for that matter, there's going to be an absolute discrimination. The Muslims will not be allowed.
There
number
is
one.
already,
schools,
if you see
admissions in universities, good universities for that matter.
This discrimination is already there, though it is not written in the constitution.
Now it's legalized.
Yeah, now
It's
it is
like
legalized.
legalized, yes.
It is legitimate to discriminate against Muslim in India. If you see the Sachar committee report, this committee was formed to see that how Muslims are contributing in Indian society, politics and economy. The Muslims have been deprived since 1947 in the Indian setup, and their rights, their contributions are not only registered and they are not there. So this is really important. And as someone said here, that Modi may win the next elections, but may not win the next elections. But you see what Modi is doing. Modi is shifting the list of priority for Indian voter. For a normal Indian. For normal Indian now, or a fanatic Indian, which is the Modi's vote bank, the economic build-up and economic stability is not the prime goal.
All right.
To save the cows cows not to be eaten are the main goal.
Well, ma'am,
Muslim
let's see, but
hatred is the main
the
priority.
course which Narendra Modi has
Employment is not.
adopted is definitely bad for India, but this is worst for the entire region. This is what I believe. But anyway,
As far as India is a nuclear state,
anyway,
and an
absolutely,
unstable
ma'am.
nuclear
With
state
fanatics sitting
can be a nightmare.
in
And there are
the
so many of
areas
them,
where they're
they
taking
can
this
go
in
to
here.
all other
Absolutely.
neighboring countries.
Absolutely.
They
Absolutely.
never
Anyway,
run out of Indians.
Yeah.
Anyway, ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank
It
you
was a
so
pleasure,
much.
Dr. Saab. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you so
And that's all we have for this. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.